Columbia University student Mahmoud Khalil, who was detained and disappeared by ICE, is speaking out just weeks after being released by a federal judge. Khalil sat down with New York Times columnist Ezra Klein in an all-encompassing interview. They discussed everything from Khalil's upbringing, leading the student pro-Palestine protests at Columbia, and his detention by the Trump administration. Let's take a look.
A Palestinian. My name is Mahmoud. And I was vocal in the media. So that's the perfect target to make an example out of. These practices were kind of present in Syria, where you have a security branch, like kidnapping you from the street or disappearing you, arbitrarily detaining you. So I never felt that this would happen to me in the United States, where they would show up without any arrest warrant, without anything, and just take me.
Khalil also had this moment, which is being heavily scrutinized on social media. Let's watch.
To me, it felt frightening that we had to reach this moment in the Palestinian struggle. And it's clear, it's becoming more and more violent. By October 6, over 200 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces and settlers. Over 40 of them were children. So that's what I mean by, unfortunately, we couldn't avoid such a moment.
Now, the Free Press founder and editor Bari Weiss reacted to that clip, writing, "This is absolutely insane. Listen and think about what he's saying here. We couldn't avoid the slaughter of the Bibas children, really?"
On the other hand, some on social media are sympathetic towards Khalil. Author and podcaster Kate Willett writes, quote, "Mahmoud Khalil's interview with Ezra Klein is good. The sheer horror of what Khalil went through at the hands of Trump and ICE is even worse than I thought." I think his detention, despite being a green card holder, despite being married to a U.S. citizen, more than anything sends a sign that if you speak out and have dissent, you will be penalized. And so he's not somebody who is, and I'm tired of the conflation between people saying, I want to stand up for Palestinian people that are innocent, that don't deserve to die, and I support Hamas. Because he's never said that. And he also talked about, because I listened to the whole interview, working in tandem with Jewish students at Columbia University, and Columbia having a responsibility to protect students so they're not standing on this hollow ground of free speech and actually allowing free speech. Like, he wasn't partaking in any type of isolation of Jewish students. He was participating with them to move forward and also say, I acknowledge October 7th was a terrible, horrible tragedy and disaster. But I also want to make sure that Palestinian people that are innocent are not mistreated after decades of feeling misplaced. And that's a valid feeling for people over there. And so I think this interview was eye-opening. And I also think that we have a responsibility, especially everyone in the Republican Party that lives and stands by free speech, to allow freedom of protest and free speech.
So I agree that he should enjoy robust First Amendment free speech protection. I complained about his detention. I wrote against it. I spoke against it. I think explicit advocacy for Hamas is deplorable, but is part of free speech. And now he's not, because of his immigration status, that there's not a right to be here in the country or a citizen, but he does have a green card. And so I think it was absolutely wrong to detain him based on his advocacy. It gets into very slippery questions. The way the administration defended it was not good to me. I'm totally against it. That said, I find his comments in this interview absolutely shocking and appalling. He said, you see, because he slows down in what he's saying and he really tries to choose his words carefully, and yet nevertheless says essentially that what happened on October 7th was necessary, was Israel's fault, what had to happen, the violence that took place there had to take place. I don't know if that's direct sympathizing with Hamas, but it sure seems to be making excuses for what Hamas did, and I think that's wrong. I think you can say the treatment of the Palestinians is wrong, and what Israel has done in response to that terrorist attack is appalling and has resulted in thousands of people dying, women and children. People are starving. The whole Gaza Strip destroyed, and that was awful. And it was awful, and frankly, it was an inevitable result of what Hamas did. Of course, Israel was going to respond in this way. I don't condone what they're responding in this way. I don't want the U.S. to help or aid or fund them in doing it or provide cover for them at all. But Hamas killed children, and that should be they should be people advocating for the Palestinian cause. I would say it would behoove them to put much more distance than Mahmoud Khalil did there between themselves and a terrorist group.
And what I heard when I listened to the interview, because obviously when you watch a whole interview, there's nobody that speaks for an hour and a half, and I'm like, yes, you said it exactly how I would, right? That's called nuance. But I heard that he has had a lifelong struggle trying to understand the connection between Palestinian dignity and human rights and trying to figure out what the way forward looks like. Obviously, this is not something new in any presidency's time, the friction between Palestinian people and Israeli people, right? We're talking about decades and decades long of struggle, and we're talking about implications from other nations that have put people in position to debate over this land. And so he's talking about an upbringing and an experience that he had that makes him feel like profoundly there's people there that are innocent, that are not Hamas, that he should stand up for as somebody who's related to that culture. And I think that that is a valid conversation worth hearing, because that's how a lot of people feel. And that doesn't mean that because you criticize Netanyahu or think that people do have an opportunity to respond for retaliation or an attack, it means that you're anti-Semitic. It means that I want you to understand that there are people who, just like people in America sometimes want nothing to do with governmental choices that may or may not hurt people or harm people, the same way that people in other countries can feel the same way. Like, I don't want to be associated with what the worst of my society is doing. I don't want, and I don't think that he should automatically be associated with that because he thinks that people, Palestinian people, should deserve the same dignity and human rights as everyone else in the world. I think the basic things that he's asking for is freedom for people that feel oppressed for decades.
But if either, what is the realistic solution, though? Because while I am against what Israel's doing, and I speak against it all the time, and I certainly don't want to fund it, and I think this outcome where thousands of people are dying is just not acceptable. That can't be, well, this is the best option we had, I just reject that. I support, in theory, the Gaza Palestinians having their own state, but the reality of that would be Hamas would be in charge, then they would be governing this area. If the people don't not want that enough to stop that from happening, Hamas would be the government, and then they've sworn to destroy Israel. They would use that position to launch further attacks on Israel. Israel said, well, that cannot happen. If they were all one state, then there's more of them, and they would overwhelm the Jewish character of Israel and turn it into some kind of Islamic theocracy like probably Iran or the other countries in the region. We don't want that to happen either. So then what do we actually do? I mean, if all those solutions are that's not tenable. Israel's never going to allow that to happen.
Yeah, Europe's position based on what's happening and the atrocities and war crimes, they're saying, next step is a two-state solution. We will recognize two states. But also you have to understand, like you always say, dictators and people that we wholly morally disagree with around the world are running countries. Yeah. That's what it is. And we work with them or don't work with them. We decide how we exchange, how we trade with them, and all these things. And so the Palestinian people should not be the only people that can't figure out how to govern themselves, right? There are many issues going on around the world.
I wish they could figure out how to govern themselves, well, they're not, but they clearly can't.
I don't think they're being given an opportunity to, right? Like, I think we need to figure out what the next...
Well, because the last time we did that, they put Hamas in charge, right? The last time there was elections held in the Gaza Strip was 20 years ago, and they put Hamas in charge. And, and again, I feel very sorry for them. I don't know what to do for them. Now they don't have the choice to change their leadership, but I don't know that they would if they could. It's just very bad, and none of the people in the region, none of the government, the Saudis, the Qataris, all of those people, they don't want to give Hamas more power either. They have to pretend that they're so worked up about the Palestinians because the people of those countries are, but the leadership of those countries, they don't want Palestinian statehood either, because
but historically we've seen
and they don't want to take
specifically
those people.
Even in the Middle East, where like when we saw the Arab Spring uprising, like you'll see this.
That was a disaster.
Yeah, but you see that there's leaders that the people and the public don't want, so that's okay to happen. We can let it be an uprising, but you can let people live. These people are starving to death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At least let them live to have an uprising or live to decide what their leadership looks like. People just want an opportunity at life, and so when you have protesters saying, even a year ago, this is going too far. I think we could have stopped this earlier. One thing to defend yourself from an attack, another thing to commit what the international community sees as war crimes. And now that we're 2 years plus in, I think that it's time to figure out what a realistic solution is, because starving people to death is not.
Well, if Mahmoud Khalil and his faction want to be part of that discussion, I would like to see more acknowledgement from them. Hamas is a terrorist group. They are reprehensible. They cannot be the leadership of Gaza because Israel will never allow that, and their leadership is not good for the Palestinian people. And the violence that they perpetrated was not inevitable, was not some legitimate thing, but was a conscious decision by them to cause terrorism that has produced a response that has gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of their own people killed.
And I acknowledge that, and I'd like to say,
well, I know you do.
No, and I'd like to say that I think that it's also behooves people who support Israel blindly to acknowledge that Netanyahu is flawed and he can be criticized.
Yes.
And so simultaneously, both of those things should happen much more.
Yes. No blind loyalty to Netanyahu or to the Israeli government. America first. I am absolutely in agreement on that.
So we end on a positive note.
Yeah, I think on this one we agree with more on. We more agree on this than some other topics we've had to address today.
GOP Rep Corey Mills accused of revenge porn threats. We'll talk to Hill reporter Emily Brooks about it next. We'll be right back.